Today, my topic here, does God exist? It's a question that I'd like you to learn how to answer. If you're a Christian, you must learn how to answer. But to you yourself, whether you're Christian or non-Christian, do you have any idea how to answer this question? Does God exist? Of course, we say, of course God exists. Can you tell why? Why do you say God exists? Some weeks ago, we talked about how does God look like. We are talking about, let's say, this board here. I said, this is God. Can you tell me, prove to me this is not God? Do you? Do you know, for many years as a Christian, I couldn't answer that question. So Andy explained this, that this is not God, because why? When we expect something that speaks of God, we expect it to be under skies. It must be sovereign. It must be a creator. He must be creating things ex nihilo, meaning from nothing to something. He must have absolute knowledge of everything. Certainly everything about you and me. He must be independent in the sense that you don't have to feed him. He's the one who feeds you. He's eternal. He has no beginning and no end. We say he's sinless. That means without fault at all. You cannot find a single fault or mistake. Every time you do mathematics calculation, you find you make mistakes. And then we learn from there. So making mistakes, nothing wrong for human beings. But God has absolutely no mistake. So if this book is from God, there must not be a single mistake here. That is how we know this is not God. Because it's not eternal. It's not the creator. He creates nothing. It's not able to be independent. I need to move it around to get it going. So you learn that. What do you expect to see God? What is God like? But today's topic is different. It goes one more fundamental. Does God exist? How do I know God exists? Oh, the Bible says so. Well, that's a good answer, but for non-Christians, they don't know what the Bible says. Of course, some parents are very bureaucratic. They tell their children, I say so. Yeah, but who are you? So we need to go a little bit more under what we call reason. God says, come, let's reason together. What's the reason you believe there is God? And what's the reason for those who say there is no God? So today's topic is very simple, actually, for those who understand. It's very, very chim for those who don't understand. It's simple as that. So today, I'm asking you, especially you young people, you need to focus. I've spent many hours thinking through how to simplify. And yet, I know that no matter how I simplify, it's too complicated for some. But if God will download to you an understanding, you'll find quite easy. Of course. But that's more than that. Unlike you, if you're a Christian, you'll be able to explain what I explained today. I want you to listen with this view. I will try and remember so that I can explain what is being explained today. That is the test. It's not good enough that you believe God exists. You also need to know why you think God exists. That's a question. Why do you think God exists? So we are going to depend, firstly, on what the Bible says and how we can know, okay? Because God has a wisdom, so we begin with God. Maybe you read this verse together with me. Men are without excuse because God has revealed himself that he exists through what? being understood by the things that are made. The things that are made. We need to understand we can see God through the things that are made. Now, the entire passage in Romans 1 gives you not only that through the things He has made, God also says that this is since the creation of the world. From the time God created the world. What God has created, if you understand the mysteries of what God has created, that ought to tell you that He exists. You see, in the world, many people say there is no God. And they're very sure there is no God. But the problem is some of them are quite well-known scientists. And therefore they come up with the idea that science proves there is no God. But there's no such thing. Now, the three things I would like to cover with you today is why is it? What hinders us from experiencing God? Because most of us, in order to know God, we need to experience God. How has God chosen to reveal Himself? And thirdly, does science indeed prove that God does not exist? So I'm going to tackle these three questions. These are common questions. The key reason why people do not experience God is firstly because of suffering. And many people say because of, if there's a powerful God who cares, how come there's so much suffering? These are questions non-Christians want an answer. And we cannot just keep saying the Bible says so. Today the focus is on reasoning. How to reason. All right? So most people who cannot experience God is because they have seen suffering and it disturbs them. They think that God doesn't care. So there's a rebellion against God. So they say, maybe there is no God. It's easier to understand suffering if there's no God than if there is a God. Is that correct? So that's one reason. The second thing you need to know about why some people say there's no God and cannot experience God is because of disappointment. They're disappointed that there are certain things God never did for them. They're disappointed with life. They're disappointed with people. And that's because they have wrong expectations. They think that God, if He exists, He must give me everything I want. God is not a Santa Claus because of wrong expectation. And thirdly, because they don't know what are God's conditions. God has conditions. Without faith, God said He will not show Himself to us. Without humility, God says He will not reveal Himself to us. So, there are conditions. How has God chosen to reveal Himself? And Romans 1:20 says, through His creation. So, creation is very simple. But how do you look at creation? Most of us cannot see the details, and so we cannot tell why it is, how does creation tell us that there is a God? Well, the most important word here, can you see, is the word intelligent design. But the most important, the first reason I would say, is design. Because everything that has got to do with an intelligent mind is shown by a design. The more complicated the design, the more complex the design, the more intelligence is involved. Or the more simplified, we say irreducible minimum, that will speak of a mind that knows how to reduce it to simplify things. Even simplification of a complex design needs intelligence. We call it the irreducible minimum. And even then, sometimes it's already complex. So the normal hearer, I'm speaking to you, all of you, the common method most of us do is, what we don't understand, we switch off. Today, I ask you, please don't switch off on me, because this part is very important. How do you explain intelligent design? Those who say there is no God say there is no design. But is it true? How do you see there's design? So I'd like to show you one of the most important elements that shows design is the DNA. But before we see this, let me explain. You know, every day, do you know our cells are dying? So when the cells die, what happens in the body? It's being replaced. So you all look beautiful and fresh because your cells are being replaced. Because our cells die, it has got a shelf life. So how do this cell get replaced? And the process is a very complex process. And if your cells don't get replaced, what happens? A 5-year-old kid will look like an old man because his cell didn't rejuvenate, so it's dying. It's just skin is dropping off, cells are dropping off, but there's no replacement. Now, how do you know, make sure that your cells that replace are correct cells? For instance, the cells to replace your fingernails are different from the cells used to replace your ear or your hair. They are different structures. What instructs your cell to say when it goes to the ear, oh, please, you do an ear cell? What happens in your body if the cells start growing different from your normal cell? What do you call that? Exactly, you get cancer. So it's amazing none of us here got cancer. But why you can get cancer? Why is that when the cells in your body is different from the cell from another person? The DNA is different, we say. So the DNA is something you all have heard. But I want you to see this video clip to see how much of this you understand. It's about the DNA. The DNA is about information. Okay, coding information. Let's see this video clip.
Let's go back to Richard Dawkins, where we started the lecture. Remember, he was saying that when we're looking at life, we're looking at something that appears to be designed, but isn't really designed. And when people took that idea and began to try to use evolutionary concept to explain the origin of life in the first place, they were really confident that they could do it because they didn't think there was even an appearance of design. The cell was thought to be so simple, they thought we didn't even have an appearance of design. Now we have an exquisite appearance of design. What we're talking about is digital code inside the cell. And Dawkins, oddly, has been one of the people who's acknowledged that this is, A, a big mystery, but also that the information in DNA is, he says, like a machine code. It's uncannily computer-like. Apart from differences in jargon, the pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal. In other words, we've got a striking appearance of design here. Now, the question I want to leave you with at the end of this lecture, and we're going to come back to address in the next lecture, is this. Has this appearance of design been explained away by any undirected process? Remember, the whole Darwinian strategy at a higher level in biology is to explain away the appearance of design using the undirected process of natural selection acting on random mutations and variations. Can that strategy work when we're talking about the origin of life? And in particular, the origin of the information you need to get life going? If so, then the conclusion of no design, which is driving the confidence that Dawkins has in his atheistic and materialistic worldview, might still hold. But if not, if we're looking at evidence of real design, we may be looking at a new day in biology, and one which is going to require an entirely different perspective.
It's very important for you to grasp this. What is this DNA? How does it actually show intelligent design? Maybe let me explain it this way. Here is a factory. This factory must produce these cells that are in your body, otherwise you'll die. You need a factory. Do you know that you're a walking factory? But this factory needs to be instructed as to what cells to produce. So the DNA is the instruction. You need coded instruction so that the factory can make the product that is needed. Right. Now, what is coded information? Instruction is also called, the key word is information. The factory doesn't know what you want them to make. Yeah, cells, but what kind of cells? So, some instruction need to go. Now, some of you are familiar with what is called CAD-CAM. Have you heard of this term, CAD-CAM? Anybody know what it is? Computer-aided design. So the factory manufactures a product, which are cells in your body, but it needs design. So in your body, there's a God-made computer. Now, the DNA you see is a double helix. It's got some characters in it. We call it 4 bases. And then it's what we call, it puts together amino acids and form the protein. Now, I know all these are words and words, but maybe you follow me here. Those of you who do IT knows that you have also information and coding. You're familiar with it. Ask any IT people here. You got zeros and 1, 0, 1. Just 0, 1, 0 and encoding. All computers use encoding. So when you instruct your computer to retrieve certain information, well, that's how information is communicated by encoded computer language. Should be 0 and 1s. At this very basic, I don't say it's chim. I also not very computer software expert myself, but this DNA double helix you see in this picture exactly carries the information, except that instead of 0 and 1, you use 4 characters. A, C, T, G. Okay, the details. This is not a science class, so I don't think, I try and simplify it, all right? And but this DNA chain information is very long. But nonetheless, this is the coded information that must be fed to the factory. Okay. So what you see in this video clip, I'm going to show you again, is it instructs the factory, and it's amazing how your factory know what to do when he receives the information. Then it comes out cells that will be transported to the different parts of your body to replace it, so you all look young. And for younger people, you look older. All right, that's to rejuvenate your life. Otherwise, we'll die young. All right, we cannot survive. So there are 2 parts. Someone has to write this information. Information must come from, what do you call this? Intelligence. It comes from a mind. And a mind must be in a person. Okay, you don't see a mind in a rock. I know some of us think our minds are as hard as rock, but it's not true. There are plenty of circuits inside. But this coding and information or direction or instruction as to how to do, what to do, comes from a mind. We call it in science lingo information. Information. The factory needs information to know, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? And so this chain called the double helix or DNA carries all the information that's necessary for the factory to produce. And Mr. Darwin didn't know about this. He thought everything is so simple. It's just one little soup come out from it, one simple cell called the amoeba, and the amoeba keeps adding information. No such thing. Information can reduce but not increase. It always reduce, not increase. So, but where did the information come from? It comes from our mind. That is understood. It cannot come from a dead substance. A mind, an intelligent person. Yes, the Bible calls him God. So now, what I want you to know is, this time I'm going to show you the second time. Because this is actually a simplified form of what is actually happening. It's already oversimplified. And I want you to just know even all the parts. There's the part that's being manufactured is the brown piece. But the information is on the blue piece. Now you watch this carefully so that you can explain to your friend. Because your friends may ask you, how does DNA prove there is God? You see, it proves that DNA carries information. And information must come from an intelligent mind. And this intelligent mind must be able to design things. And the design is in our very body cells. It's design. Firstly, design. Then there's a factory in your body that makes it.
All right. About it. Let's look at a little piece of animation that shows exactly how this plays out. And what we're going to see is how the information in DNA directs the synthesis or construction of proteins.
In 1957, Francis Crick first proposed that chemicals, called bases along the spine of the DNA molecule, function as alphabetic characters in a written language or digital characters in machine code. This short animation shows how this digital information directs protein synthesis. First, a large protein complex separates the tightly wound strands of the DNA to prepare it to be copied. During this process of transcription, a protein complex called a polymerase produces a single-stranded copy of the original instructions. Here we see this copy, a messenger RNA molecule being constructed inside the polymerase. Now we see the polymerase in action from the outside as it spits out the messenger RNA transcript. Next, this RNA transcript approaches and passes through a molecular machine called the nuclear pore complex, an information recognition device that controls the flow of information in and out of the cell's nucleus. Now we see the genetic assembly instructions approaching and arriving at a two-part chemical factory called a ribosome, the site of protein synthesis. As the messenger RNA transcript passes through the ribosome, the process of translation ensues. During translation, a mechanical assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids in accord with the instructions on the transcript. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cells by molecules called transfer RNAs, which link specific sequences of bases to corresponding amino acids. The sequential arrangement of the amino acid determines the type of protein constructed. When the construction of the chain is complete, it is often transported to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape required to perform its function. After the chain is folded into a protein, it is released into the outer cytoplasm to do its job in the cell.
I'm an engineer by training, so I also got to learn just the same way you need to learn about cells. The wonder of, you heard the word factory, you heard the word information, and you heard about ribosomes and so on. This is some of the language of creation that you need to pick up. Don't say, these are complicated. No, these are the language that we use for transmitting the message here, that God is very, very wise. See how complex it is? And then it's how your cell is being renewed every day. You didn't even know this. When I saw this, I was so amazed. And I said, God, you're a really designer. Now, some of you are just seeing all these cells going on here and there. How does it look like in real life? Have you ever been to a beauty contest? Not necessarily, not as a contestant, but you watch a beauty contest. I know you holy men don't ever see beautiful women on beauty contests, right? So those of us not so holy, we watch this beauty contest. And I know most women also watch, right? Women like to see beautiful women too, right? And when you see a beautiful woman out there, what makes you think that woman is beautiful? I say woman because we don't have men's contests. So we have, God has endued women with great beauty. And you need to believe this. What makes that woman beautiful? How do you know that woman is beautiful? Yeah, well designed. Firstly, on top, what must a woman have? Hair, the right amount. If it's all over her hair, what do you get? A gorilla. Have you been to a gorilla beauty contest? So gorillas are not beautiful, at least to human beings, all right? Now, what else do you see about a woman that's beautiful? The right proportion, the right shape, correct? Then skin color, then the proportion. We say big eyes, not too big, otherwise they look like owls. But everything about a woman is so beautiful, just from the physical shape alone, the proportion, you know that that's something so beautiful. And it all has to do with the DNA. So I know some of you say, well, I wish God give me those DNA of those beautiful women or that handsome guy. But really, a lot of it is not because God didn't put that DNA of beauty in us. It's because we never do maintenance. Everything you don't do maintenance, it goes haywire. It looks ugly. So I believe every woman is beautiful if you know how to do maintenance. And not complain every time you look in the mirror and say, God, you make some mistake in your DNA, you know. No, He never makes mistakes. So that's how it looks beautiful. The Word of God says God makes everything beautiful in His time. But when it comes to our time, we never maintain. Of course, then we blame God. So, I only show you one. But I'd like to show you one more thing that is common to all machines. Whether it's a motor car or a crane, what do you have in your design? Let me give you a simple example of design. But let me give you another example of all machines, because you read here and there, they are called words like molecular machines. All right, so let me explain to you. Your body is full of molecular machines, meaning they are machines, but at the molecular level. That means it's the smallest. So any machine, all right, we have what is called a drive. You must have a drive. So in a motor car, a drive would be the engine. Then you need to have another thing called control. And of course, there are other things, but let me just focus on two things. You cannot have any machine that has a drive like an engine, but no control. What happens? If there's no control, it'll be out of control. All of us always think about, when we look at a car, what do you see? We only see the outside. But really what works is the engine. Now, the second part will be the control. Everything God makes and works has these two key functions and more. But let me just go on to these two first. When Darwin and all his friends Darwin copied the concept of evolution. In fact, he copied from everywhere. So much so that he could not even integrate his book on the origins of life. That it took him 12 years to correct and recorrect until there's some resemblance of integration. That means you say A, you must connect to B, B cannot contradict A, and so much contradiction. It took him 12 years. That's happened when he copies. But his disciple Thomas Huxley said, very good, so explained his concept. But let me get back to you. You know, everything that God, he did not understand the concept of controls. Those of us in engineering, we are very clear on exact sciences. This is a form of a machine. You know what this is? This is the tail of the bacteria that swims around in your stomach when you eat yogurt. They call it probiotics and so on. Actually, but they are good bacteria, don't worry, they are good bacteria. Bacteria is shaped like a sausage, but this is the tail. Sometimes it's called a flagellant because it looks like a whip, so we call it flagellant, you know, like cowboys, they wave, something like that. So this is a tail of a tiny bacteria. But it's a machine, it's a micro machine, very powerful micro machine. And a scientist called Scott, he researched this machine for 20 years. 20 years, he got a doctorate for researching this. Now, this is a machine. There are 40 parts to this machine. Your engine has got less than 40 parts, but this is a micro machine and the tail of a bacteria. Every bacteria has this machine. Now, it has got a rotor, which means it returns. It's got a tail, because it's the tail that moves the bacteria forward and backwards and so on. So it's a machine, 40 parts. Now, so tiny has got design. It's got a stator, it's got a rotor, it's got bearings, it's got all kinds of things. You see that green part, that's the wall of the skin of the bacteria. So it's attached on it at the tail. Not at the head, at the tail. All right, now. The researcher says this, that not only must it be designed, it must be designed to fit in a certain order. Now, if you are familiar, there's a word we will always hear from scientists, the word sequencing. That means it must be in correct sequence. Design requires a correct sequence. For instance, 40 parts. You can have all the 40 parts. According to scientist Mr. Scott, he said, you can have all the 40 parts, but if you don't join it correctly, it will not work. So, Mr. Scott, who was not a Christian, said this, all the parts must exist all together at one time. You cannot evolve the tail, and then after some time, you have the rotor turning part, then the stator turning part, and the bearings, and no. If you just have the tail, very soon you'll drop off. There'll be no more tail. all the parts, 40 parts, must not only exist together at one time, but it must be assembled in correct sequence. This word sequencing is a very important word in the field of sciences. Okay, so this is called a machine, a very efficient machine. That's why bacteria thrives everywhere. They swim everywhere. And what does it tell about it? You need to have a drive. But we have a problem here. If there's only a drive and no control, what will happen to this poor bacteria? He'll go swimming on and knock against the wall. He rub his head, turn around, he'll keep on turning. So you must control it. All right. Same as a motor car. If you have a motor car and have an engine, is that enough? What must you have in a motor car? Someone said brakes. A sad thing happened just a few days last week. A few days ago, one man, by accident, reversed the car at full speed and killed his wife. And he said, I don't think I want to drive anymore. He has lost confidence. That car had gone out of control because he stepped on the accelerator instead of the brakes. Now, you need to have control. Brakes will control one thing when you want to stop the car, but it doesn't control everything. What else do you have in a motor car? Have you been to a car without a steering wheel? All right. How many of you who drives can afford to take your eyes off the road for 1 second? In 1 second, your car will go out of line, correct or not? So not only the wheel helps you to control, but actually more important is, they say, what's the most important part in a motor car? Someone asked this fellow who was taking the driving test. And this man gave the best answer. He said it's the nut behind the wheel. The nut behind the steering wheel. He's not talking about that nut. He's talking about the man behind the steering wheel. You are the control in control. And you know you have to keep continuous control. Now, control is very important. No control, the machine will go out of control and it will cause a disaster. But there are many, many more things. Control. Most of you have aircon in your car. Nobody drives a car without an aircon now. Now, it's important to have a refrigerating system in your car. But you also need a control. Otherwise, your temperature might go down to 0 and you get frozen in your own car. So you control within 24 plus or minus 2 degrees. So you're comfortable. So control is a part that Darwin never thought about. Now, let me show you. So this one needs control. Through creation, God has made it plain, the Word of God says. How does He make it plain? We say God's control. You need to have a control of your drive. And, you know, you hear words like the Big Bang Theory. But the truth is, there are trillions of planets in our universe. Trillions. And we haven't really discovered many more. Let me explain about control here, because it speaks about intelligent design. All of you know that this is the sun. And there's one planet here, then planet Earth here, and then there are other planets, and then one big one here called Jupiter, right? Now, our planet Earth goes around the sun, right? Now, how many things happens on planet Earth? You all are sitting down still. You think you are still, you are mistaken. There's a lot of movement taking place now. Planet Earth is spinning 24 hours. It goes round one turn, right? It is what we call rotating. It has got to rotate. Now, this rotation alone is amazing. It must be controlled. It must not go faster. It must not go backwards. it must be fixed. Otherwise, the ocean will go into the land. So, who controls this? You say nobody controls. Now, in engineering, we all know one basic rule, the rule of entropy. The rule is this, that something will come to a stop unless you increase power, unless external energy is put in. Otherwise, it's just like a motor car. You drive it, you take your foot from the accelerator. What happens to your car? You drive from here to Jurong. It ain't gonna get to Jurong. You know that, because you need to keep on adding energy. All right, but keeping the speed exactly the same, that's control. So two things on this rotation. Now, I always hear when some some scientists who are atheists, when they open their mouth, they say, millions and millions and billions of years ago, then the earth was formed. You know, the argument can be cut backwards. How long does your watch keep good time? If your quartz watch, 2 years is very good. After 2 years, it goes slow, and then it stops. Why? Battery gone. To keep the speed exactly the same is a very difficult thing to do, even for 2 years for a quartz watch. Can you do it billions and billions of years, maintaining same speed? Make sure it doesn't go faster or slower. 24 hours fixed. Hey, that needs an intelligent mind and great power. But there's only one thing. It has got to go around the sun exactly 364 and 1/4 days. Fixed. At a fixed distance from the sun. You cannot go too near, otherwise we all get roasted like barbecue. And we cannot go too far, otherwise we get frozen like ice cream. So this distance must be controlled precisely. And they say billions and billions of years. Wow, that's a great miracle to maintain the distance year after year. So that's called revolution, correct? That's the third one. The Earth, planet Earth, has to toggle 23¼ degrees, thereabouts, to get the seasons. Toggle means you must go forward, backwards, in relation to the sun. Exactly 23 degrees. You cannot go over and then become 80 degrees and it'll be too much for us. What makes it go backward and forwards? A force needs to be applied. Where is this force? You know, in engineering it's very clear, unless you apply a force, unless you control, it will not change direction. Who makes this earth to toggle so that we get the 4 seasons? But this is not all. This is only the third thing. There is another one. Our entire solar system is moving. And we are moving in the solar system. And our solar system belongs to the galaxy of the Milky Way. The Milky Way is moving. The solar system is moving. The Milky Way is moving. And we don't know how many Milky Ways are there in this entire universe. There's just too many. We haven't counted them yet. With so many rotation, revolution, toggling, space control, tell me, can this happen by accident? There must be intelligent someone, you know, whether it be boilers or machines, we set controls. I test boilers. Here, Colin also tests boilers. There are 2 boiler engineers boil up very fast. So we test boilers, and if these controls are not in, we fail it. You cannot use it. That's what controls so important. Because if you don't control the temperature, it'll explode. That's why. Now, controls are so important. Who is putting all these controls in there? They say billions and billions of years. Wow, this kind of control never fail one. The controls in our boilers, in every 2 years, they change. Not only change, they change the whole boiler, the machines. So now, this is only a small part of it. You need intelligence to set what we call parameters for this. All these are fixed numbers. These are exact sciences you can measure. 24 hours, you can measure. Speed. But this is not all, you know. The speed of travel has to be controlled. And make sure it doesn't move faster or slower. That is control. So many things controlled while we are sitting here. Can it be just without any design? All controls must be designed. All controls fix the limits. And God did that. But that's not all. Actually, on planet Earth, when God has made, how do you account for the ocean currents that moves in a specific direction? How do you account for bird migration that doesn't carry a compass? Have you ever seen flocks of ducks flying or birds and a master front one carrying a compass and say, oh, 50 degrees south, the other side. Nobody, they don't carry any compass. But they fly, there are birds that fly all the way from the North Pole all the way to the south. They measure is about, I believe there's somebody who measured the flight to be, as you know, measured at 30,000 kilometers flight. That's a long, long flight. So all these are controls God set in creatures. So we call it intelligent design. There are many reasons why we can show that there is God. But if you can just focus on one, intelligent design is all the time I have to tell you why it's so important. Whether it be your body, your controls. Why our planet Earth, there are controls. And there's one mistake, and planet Earth is off. We have what is called, do you know why our planet Earth is round? And why there is if you look at the globe, you'll find that the opposite side is usually an ocean. The whole Earth has to be what we call balanced. Have you driven motor cars where the wheel is worn out on one side, and then when you run, it goes rattling away because the wheel is out of balance? We call it dynamic forces. Darwin never considered dynamic forces, but in this world there are dynamic forces. You get dynamic forces every time something moves. If planet Earth must be properly balanced so that when it spins, it will not go wobbling out of the orbit. It must be perfectly balanced. But not only planet Earth must be perfectly balanced, it must be balanced against external planets, because the aligning of these planets affects planet Earth. You know there's something that also comes around planet Earth, right? What do you call this? Yeah, the moon. The moon needs to be balanced against the movement of the Earth, because the moon affects the Earth's movement. All this balancing. In engineering, you always have to take care of balancing. Who is doing all this? The perfect mind of God. God has never made any mistake. The moon has never dropped. It's always at a fixed distance. It affects our tide. If the moon had come nearer, our tides would be too much. We'll get floods every 24 hours. 2 times every 24 hours. So there is control, tremendous control in the entire universe. Everything is under control. And the Word of God says it's Jesus who sustains the world. After creating the world, He has to sustain it. He has to keep in control. But people don't understand it. So I've talked about renewable systems. Systems need to be designed. What systems do we see in this world? You know, system is what normally we call a closed system. For instance, our water system, there's a cycle. We use the water goes to a water treatment works, then it made into new water. Actually, it's the old water, and then the new water is recycled, and we use the water again. So this is called our water renewing system. So that's what man-made is to be designed. But in God's plan, everything in the world, we've got hundreds of renewal systems. Your oxygen level must be 21%. How do you keep this level at 21%? That's why God created trees. So when people keep on cutting trees and don't replant it, it affects the balance. But why must it be 21%? Because once it goes to 19%, just 2% difference, you'll get giddy and you'll faint. Many of those who died in shipyards gone into a tank where I've measured at 18%. 3% difference will knock you out. Then you say, if I were God, I'm smarter than him. I'll make it not 21, I'll make it 23%. 24%. What will happen when it's 24%? When you drop a spark on your shirt, you'll burn your entire body straight away. Rapid combustion. Sorry, I'm using some engineering words. You need to learn the vocabulary behind it. So it's all tightened, very, very narrow limits. But there's only oxygen in the air. What about the sea? What about the food cycle? What about they call it the ecosystems? How do we get not only the air being renewed, how about water? But I want you to walk away with not just saying, God designed everything. Yeah, in what way has He designed? These are the details. We won't have time to finish this entire presentation, but let me quickly go into the common ones that I want to answer very quickly why reputable scientists say there's no God. One of them is none other than Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking wrote a book called The Grand Design, and in this book he says the grand design is that there's no design. If you're confused, I'm also confused. But he's a very reputable scientist. So he must be right. No. Let me tell you, intelligent people who are scientists and specialists in a field, actually they know a lot about their narrow field, but very little about other fields. So Mr. Hawking is specialized in the field of physics. But what about spiritual things? That's not his specialty. And Jesus said, that which is flesh is flesh. That means which is material. That which is spirit. You cannot use physical measurement to measure spiritual things. For instance, you cannot say, how fat is this man? All right, you measure it 32 inches. Now you want to measure the spirit. You cannot use the same instrument to measure the spiritual realm. Very simple. Even electricity you cannot see. You cannot measure it by looking at it. Some people measure it by touching it. Well, that's one way, but it's very dangerous. So there are instruments for measuring, ammeters to measure how much current. So you need to use the right instrument for the right thing. So you cannot use physical material. You see, evolutionists and atheists make use of material world measurements for spiritual world measurements. It cannot work. So he says there's no God since I cannot measure. One of the faces that says there's no God today is a chap called Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins had a big debate with one scientist who is a Christian, and Richard Dawkins kept on talking about evolution, and then this scientist, there was a debate of two scientists, one Dawkins and another is a Christian. The Christian asked him, can you give us one example of a missing link? And Dawkins stood there for 10 minutes. He could not give any answer. And Dawkins believed there's no design. No, clearly after I described to you, there's some kind of design, a lot of complex design. He says, these are not design. It's all by nature. What's nature? Well, it's very hard to get an explanation from him. Because they claim they know something. So he wrote a book called God Delusion. I saw people reading this book. It's a popular book. How come people like to read this book? There are those who are opposed to God, likes this kind of books. Then one of the things that science can be also manipulated, just like statistics can be manipulated. So this guy who says there's no God is a guy called Haeckel. He came up with this picture called where the embryos. This is a picture. You see the top line on this white picture. The top line here has to do with the embryos of all creatures, different kind of animals. Salamanders, and right to the end are human beings. So the second line shows you how embryos develop, and then last line gives you a clearer picture of what animal it is. Can you follow it? Can you watch it now? Right at the end is the baby. And the other end is a fish. So since embryos look the same, we must have evolved from the same source. That's his conclusion. Now, this guy is a scientist. Scientists can lie. And later on, within a short time, other scientists found out that all these embryos, drawings, the whole lot was drawn up by him. In real life, it's not like that. Real life is completely different. I got another picture, but I didn't. All these animals, in real life, even embryos are different in shape. And the science community straight away said this is a fake. And it is not true. But today, this picture still appears in your book of biology. It's already discovered over 100 years that this is fake, and yet it still appears. Someone has an agenda somewhere. Agenda for what? Against God. Another fake is, let me quickly go to, is the fake of this top picture. This picture is the shape of a skull called a Piltdown man. Evolutionists say that there's no need for God. Man came from gorillas, from apes. So he can demonstrate with this skull that man came from apes because the top part of the skull is a human skull, but the bottom part of the jaw was from an ape. How come an ape jaw can fit into a human jaw, skull? Well, the guy who fake it, file it, and shape it, and then fitted it into the human skull and say, there you are. It's a human skull, half man, half ape. We have come from apes, he says. But and this one went on for 100 years. Everybody believed it. Until 1950s, when the electron microscope was invented, then they discovered that this guy has filed away the lower jaw of an ape to fit It was far away, and the firing lines could be seen. The other falsehood was, you see this picture all the time in books, that from the ape, we slowly become a human being. Have you seen this picture? They say this proves we came from apes. Now, there are two problems here. One is they found that the ape spine is the same dimension. The spine of an ape, because he has to crawl on all fours, this spine is same dimension throughout. But a human spine, because he has to stand up, you'll find that it's small here, it's bigger here below, because this is where the pelvic area you have to carry a lot of loads. The top, it carries less load. It's a different dimension. So an ape cannot become a human being, because if that's the case, our spine will be too weak to hold our body, because we have to stand up on two legs, not on four. All right. Anyhow, this picture continues to appear everywhere. The trouble is you cannot find this intermediate. We call it missing links. Has never been found. But yet, in biology books, you still see this picture. This is a lie. So the scripture says God is angry with those who suppress the truth with lies. And this, I only have time to show you these few things. It is full of lies. I just want to ask you, if your non-Christian friend asks you this question, is there a God? From the aspect of intelligent design, can you explain? And can you also explain why the arguments that man came from monkeys or apes is untrue? So God knows that we can see him through creation. But the enemy, Satan himself, puts in all these elements to confuse us. I've spoken to pastors in the States who believes this evolution stuff, who believes that we have evolved after billions of years, and who tries to put in ungodly truth, lies, to mix with the Word of God. And we need to be able to explain it for those who ask us a reason. Today, I wonder whether you see the wonder of God's creation.